friends, my name is Millie and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to bring you a big unhaul. So as you can see from the shelves around me, I have completely rearranged my bookshelves. They are now organised by genre, also largely by heights within that genre, to create a bit more room. And in doing so, I've found a few books I'm just like, I don't really need to keep these. They can go to better homes, whether I just don't really want to read them anymore or whether I've read them and either not enjoyed them and so don't need them, or enjoyed them but not enough to keep them. I'm just going to unhaul them. I'm going to stick some more up on my Vinted, which will be linked down in the description below if you wanted to grab any of these. They'll be really cheap, I'm sure. And yeah, I'm just going to get right into it because there is quite a lot of books in this unhaul. So we're starting off with Skin of the Sea by Natasha Bowen. I think I gave this like 3-ish stars. It's a YA fantasy. It's all to do with sirens or mermaids or something. I did enjoy the first book. I really didn't like the second book, which I read on NetGalley, and I didn't enjoy the first book enough to need to keep it. So I feel like this can go to a better home to someone who's going to enjoy it more. The next one is The Song That Moves the Sun by Anna Bright. This is quite sad because this was actually the first ever ARC that I ever received, and I kind of kept it for that reason, but I didn't enjoy it, so I don't need to keep it. I have enough ARCs, I have enough special books that I love to keep. I don't need to keep this one just because it was the first one I was ever sent. We then have P.S. I Love You by Cecilia Ahern. I love the movie. I don't think I've really got any interest in reading the book. I found this in a charity shop and I found this like 6 years ago and I haven't wanted to pick it up, so I'm not going to. I can always just get it again from another charity shop if I really feel like I do want to read it. Then have A Dark and Starless Forest by Sarah Hollowell. This is a YA kind of fantasy horror contemporary and I remember really enjoying it, but now I can't remember anything about it and I don't feel like it's a favourite enough that I need to keep it. Then have Dark and Deepest Red by Anna Marie McElmore. This is a YA magical realism kind of book and not bad by any means, but it wasn't enough of a favourite to keep it. We then have For a Divergent Collection by Veronica Roth. This is quite weird for me, getting rid of a book that I've had since I was literally like 12 years old, but I've only ever read this the once and I don't remember particularly enjoying it. Obviously the Divergent series as a whole is kind of tainted a bit because of the ending of that series, which if you know you know, and I just don't feel like I need to keep this short story collection. I'm not a lover of short stories anyway, and I don't think I'm ever going to reread it, so it can go. We then have Wayward Son and Anyway the Wind Blows by Rainbow Rowell. These are the second and third books in the Simon Snow series, which started with Carry On, and I like this series, but it's not a favourite. Like, I know this series is a big favourite for a lot of people, but it's not a favourite series, and I only feel like I need to keep the first book in the series. That's the only one I would ever reread if I was to reread them. I don't remember enjoying these two books as much as I enjoy the first book, which even that isn't a lot, so I don't need to keep these. Then have Fever Code by James Dashner, which is like an origins story, part of the Maze Runner. I don't think I've ever read this. I have read the Maze Runner trilogy a couple of times and I do really enjoy those books, but I have never read this one and I don't think I'm ever going to. If I do reread the Maze Runner at any point, I don't feel like this is a necessary part of it for me, so it can go. We then have Descendants of the First by Rennie K. Amayo. This is actually the second book in a duology. I think I got this book without realising it was part of a duology and I just have no inclination to actually buy the first book now. I bought this like 3 years ago. I haven't wanted to buy the first book in all of that time. Obviously I can't read this without the first book, so it can go. It can go to a better home. Then have Almost American Girl by Robin Hard. This is an illustrated memoir and I really enjoyed this. It's a really wonderful graphic novel, very well illustrated, very emotional story of this girl's life, and I just feel like I'd rather it go to someone who can also enjoy it because I'm not going to reread this, so I don't feel like I need to keep it around. It can just go to someone else who can also experience the joy of this book. Then have an ARC of The Sun and the Void by Gabriela Romero La Cruz. Obviously ARCs are not going to go on my Vinted because you can't sell ARCs, so I will probably do an exchange of these somewhere at some point. I don't really know how you do those, but anyway. I got this as an ARC from Daphne Press and I was very, very grateful. It's so shiny and I was so excited for this book, but it ended up falling flat for me and I'm not going to continue the series, so I don't need to keep this book. I'm sure someone who loves this book would much rather have an ARC of it than I would, so... And then similarly, I have The Ones We Burn by Rebecca Mix. I had the Fairy Loot edition of this at some point and I think I sold that or got rid of that, my last unhaul, and since then I've realised I also don't need the ARC. I didn't enjoy the book that much. I don't need the ARC as well. We then have One Day in December by Josie Silver. I read this last month in December of 2024 and it's kind of a mixed feeling for me. I did enjoy it, but at the same time I really, really didn't like it. And I know I'm not going to reread this because of how much the main characters annoyed me, so it can go to a better home. It might go to my mum, she might want to read it, who knows. We then have the Fairy Loot edition of Sing Me to Sleep by Gabby Burton. This is a very, very gorgeous edition and I am quite sad to be getting rid of this because it is so pretty, but I read the second book of this as a NetGalley ARC and I really didn't like the second book in this duology. I really enjoyed the first book. There's a really strong sisterly dynamic, but I didn't love the romance, and the second book, the sister dynamic kind of disappears and is completely focused on the romance and it just tainted the whole duology for me. I know I'm not going to reread this first book, so someone else can have this very gorgeous edition of it if they missed out on it when it first came out. We then have North Ranger by Ray Terciero and Brie Indigo. This is a graphic novel and I enjoyed this, but I'm not going to reread it, so it can go to a better home. Now these ones are for very different reasons. So The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson is purely because I have, you can't even see that, I have the edition of it here that matches all of the other books in the series in the Cosmere, and this one doesn't. I got it from a charity shop for like £5. The spine is all kind of creased and stuff and bent and it doesn't look nice with all my other books, and if I already have a copy of it I don't need this, so this can go. And then similarly with this, it's Vicious by V. Schwab. I definitely prefer the updated cover for this series and I have the updated cover of it, so I don't need this one, this old cover that is, to be honest with you, pretty ugly. So someone else can have this. We then have The Darkening by Sunya Mara. I enjoyed this book, but I kind of forget that I've read it, and I also apparently have read the sequel. I completely forgot that I read the sequel until I was looking through my Goodreads, and I think that just goes to show this series just hasn't been a standout to me, and this is a very pretty edition and I just think someone else might love it more than I will. Then have an ARC of Relit edited by Sandra Proudman. This is an anthology of Latinx remixes of classic stories. So you've got like Pride and Prejudice in Outer Space, Frankenstein at the Bottom of the Ocean, The Great Gatsby on an Island in the Caribbean, and I just don't really enjoy anthologies. They're not really for me. I've discovered that after reading a few of them, and there's actually not any authors in this anthology who I've read before and know that I love, so I feel like this can go to someone who would enjoy it more. Then have the Owl Crate edition of Jade Fire Gold by Jean C.L. Tan. So I actually have the Fairy Loot edition of this, so I don't need two editions of this book, especially when I feel like it was only like a 3.5 star read for me. I can't remember exactly. So I don't need two special editions of it. I got this when I had overlapping Owl Crate and Fairy Loot subscriptions, and now I only have Fairy Loot and I just prefer that edition to this one, so this can go. We then have Firebird by Sun Mi. This is a graphic novel, proof edition, and I enjoyed this, but not enough to keep it. Another graphic novel. There's loads of graphic novels in this unhaul for some reason. I don't know why, but these ones are just, they're not standouts to me. And the same goes for Stargazing by Jen Wang. This is a middle grade graphic novel and I enjoyed it, but not enough to keep it. And exactly the same situation with Dragon Hoops by Jean Luen Yang. This is a graphic novel about the history of basketball, or the history of a specific basketball team, and I enjoyed it, but I don't watch basketball. I'm not a fan of any sport really, so I don't need this. And it's really heavy and big. It takes up a lot of room, so. Then another anthology is Meet Cute with stories by Jennifer L. Armentrout, Danielle Clayton, Nina LaCour, Julie Murphy, Nicola Yoon, and I enjoyed this, but there were some that were just not for me. I'm not going to reread it, so it can go. Then have For She Is Wrath by Emily Varga. There is absolutely nothing wrong with this book. It's purely because I was sent this one by the publisher and I'm very grateful for that. But I also got the Fairy edition of it, and I'd just rather have a special edition than a standard edition. And I do think that this is gonna be a really great book. It's very pretty, it's very shiny. I just don't need 2 copies of a book that I don't know if I love yet. If I need the standard edition, I can just rebuy it. Then have Dumpling and Pudding by Julie Murphy. So I really enjoy the film of Dumpling. I bought the book after watching the film when it came out on Netflix however many years ago, and I enjoyed the book, but I didn't really love Pudding, the sequel. There's also a 3rd book called Pumpkin, and I don't have any desire to read that, and I don't have any desire to reread these. They weren't favourites for me, so they can go to a better home. Then have This Is Not a Personal Statement by Tracy Badua. This is a YA contemporary set at college, and it's basically about this young girl who sneaks into college, essentially, and it was all a bit hard to believe, but I just feel like someone else will enjoy having this more than I will. We then have If You Change Your Mind by Robbie Weber. This is a YA contemporary. I remember enjoying it, I think, but I don't really remember anything about it, so it clearly hasn't stood out to me, so I don't need to keep it. Similarly with If I Can Give You That by Michael Gray Buller, I remember enjoying it, I think, but I don't remember anything about it, so not necessary to keep. We then have To Hear It in Bloom by Farah Heron. This is also a YA contemporary, and it wasn't bad, but it really wasn't for me, and I just feel like someone else is going to enjoy it more than I will enjoy just having it sat on my shelf. And the cover is absolutely gorgeous as well, so there's always that. We then have The Space Between Here and Now by Sarah Sook. This is kind of like a YA sci-fi almost. Sci-fi isn't really my genre, I haven't read all that much of it, but it's basically about this girl who has sensory time warp syndrome. So she can time travel back to a moment in her life when she smells a scent that is from that time, and it's all completely involuntary, and it's very short. I feel like it should have been longer. Someone else might enjoy it more. We then have the indie edition of The Spanish Love Deception by Elena Armas. I got this when this was like blowing up online, blowing up on TikTok, and I enjoyed it. It wasn't great. I've read better romances since then. There are better romances on my shelf and better romances I want to make room for on my shelf, so this can go. Similarly with It Happened One Summer and Hook, Line and Sinker by Tessa Bailey, I enjoyed these. They weren't standout favourites. I definitely preferred Hook, Line and Sinker to It Happened One Summer. I'm not sure Tessa Bailey is really for me, so these can go to someone who would enjoy them more. Proving that, I also read Window Shopping last December in 2024, and this was really not for me at all. I didn't like this, so this can go to a better home as well. I think I'm gonna give up on Tessa Bailey after reading 3.5 of her books, because I read her new Christmas novella as well and didn't really like that. I don't think Tessa Bailey is for me. Also have The Ghosts We Keep by Mason Diva. This is a YA contemporary. I enjoyed it, not as much as I was expecting to. I still have I Wish You All the Best by Mason Diva to read, which I'm really looking forward to reading. I think I'll enjoy that one a lot more, but this one just didn't really work for me, so I feel like it would be better off with someone who would enjoy it a lot more than I did. And finally we have got Queen of None by Natanya Barron. Now this is the first book in a historical trilogy. It's an Arthurian retelling trilogy, and I really enjoyed this first book, but I read the second book on NetGalley and hated it, and it's really tainted my view of the series. I'm not going to continue with the series, I'm not going to read the third book, and it's made it so that I don't need this book because it's everything onwards is just a disappointment. So this can go to someone who can just read the first book and hopefully not find out that it's a series and just enjoy this one, because this one was good. The sequel, not good, so it can go to a better home. So that was my unhaul, pretty short and sweet, but if you want to read any of these, if you want to grab yourself a copy of any of them, just let me know in the comments or buy them off of my Vinted or whatever. In my last unhaul, I think I said, like, let me know if I'm making a mistake with any of these, and then when someone actually said that I was, I got really annoyed because in my head this isn't a mistake. I don't need these books that I'm unhauling. and once I make a decision about a book, if I'm unhauling it, it's gone. Like, there's no take backsies. So these books are gone, but you might like them, and if you want to try out any of them, if you want to grab any of them, just go to my Vinted in the description and you can have a look what's left on there. So like this video if you liked it, and subscribe if you wanna. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. If you'd like to follow me on my Goodreads, on my Bookstagram, the links will be down in the description below, and I will see you in another video soon. Bye!